Hi, everybody. Today's lesson is going to be on guitar tablature and how to read it. So I want you to take a look at the diagram that I have on screen. This is very similar to other charts we've looked at. This one is oriented like upside down is a way of thinking about it. So imagine that your guitar, this one here, imagine that it's angled like that. Yeah. So you're going to be, when you're looking at the chart, you're going to be looking at the guitar sort of upside down. But when you play it, you're going to be holding it obviously in a different arrangement, right? We don't hold the guitar this way when we play it. But this is written this way to keep it nice and neat. And it's similar to staff notation, but it's very different in many ways. First things first being that, of course, there are 6 lines. Each one of those lines corresponds to a different string on the guitar. So this line relates to the E string, the low E. And these individual lines here relate to the rest of the strings. Does that make sense? All right. I don't want you to confuse it with a neck chart, so I put them side by side here so you can take a look at them. A neck chart has vertical lines that indicate the frets, and each little individual space is kind of blocked out and used to denote what note exists at that fret position. So we're not going to be doing that. It's different. But one of the things that we're going to use from the chart is down here, the fret numbers. So the thing about tablature is that it's based on the fret number position. So the first fret, the second fret, the third fret, the fourth fret, the fifth fret, etc. So each one of the strings of the tab relates to the individual string on the guitar, and then the number associated with that is going to be written on top. So when we read it, we're going to read it linearly through time from left to right. So in that way, it's similar to sheet music. We're going to read it, and as we read it, we're going to play along with it. See here, this is the low E string. So just to make sure that we're oriented correctly. All right, good. So let's go ahead and put some tab on here and see what it actually looks like. 5, 8. So that's the 5th fret and the 8th fret. Then the 5, 7. That's on the A string, 5 and 7. 5th fret, 7th fret. Then again on the D string, 5, 7. On the G string, 5, 7. On the B string, 5, 8. And then finally on the high E string, 5. So this gives us a pentatonic scale. And we're going to play it this way. Let's take a look at another example. This one's going to start on the A string. 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5, 3, 5, 6, 3. You see? So it doesn't have to necessarily start on the low, but we still play it this way through time. And we can have up to, multiple notes on the same string. So there's no rule about that. You go 3, 5, 2, 3, 5, 2, 4, 5 in time, 3, 5, 6, right? Each one of those is a fret corresponding with that individual string. Remember that each one is a fret, and it's not anything to do with the finger, because sometimes we see the number associated with which finger we should be using. This doesn't actually tell you anything about what finger to use. You have to figure that out on your own. Instead, it just tells you the positions. So we can also play chords on the guitar, right? And so when we're playing chords and we have that written out in tab, we're going to stack them on top of each other to indicate that they're happening at the same point in time, right? Because before, as the steps of the numbers were moving, that was indicating to us that we were moving forward in time. But a chord is going to exist at the same time. Here we've got a C major. This is a C major in the first position, written in tab. So I want you to take note that you've got a 0 here and a 0 here. So that indicates the string is open. So really the note that's being played is the open note. Yep. And then here we have an X. That X indicates that that string is not played. It's muted or avoided. Next, I'm going to add in an A major. So on the E string here, We see that X again, meaning that it's muted. We've got a 0 here indicating an open string here again. And then all together we have 2, 2, 2 across those 3 strings. So if you know the A major chord, then it's starting to make sense how tablature works. Now I've added in a G major chord. So if we break that down, on the low E string, we've got the 3rd fret. Then on the A, the 2nd. Then a bunch of opens. And then that repeating 3rd fret on the E string. All right, let's try some bar chords next. Here we've got an F major bar chord. So as you can see, we're using 1st fret here, and then the rest of the bar chord shape is indicated by 3, 3, 2. There's no real indication that there is a bar like you might see on a chord chart. There's no like necessarily a line going like that or anything. Different people do tabs differently, but this is a common method that you're going to see. Now let's take a look at a bar chord from the A string root. Here we've got a B minor bar chord. Take note of that X that's there to tell us to mute that string out. Otherwise, you just play it as it's written. 2nd fret, 4th fret, 4th fret, 3rd fret, 2nd fret. Remember that because they're stacked on top of each other like this, instead of being written out like this, we play them simultaneously. This we would play linearly. The last thing I want to talk about before we move on are these indicator lines. So these are going to denote the individual bar or the individual measure of the piece of music. So for example, this here, all of these chords would be played within that 1st bar, and then these 2 would be played within the 2nd bar. Okay, so here's an example that utilizes more phrasing across the bar. So we have a group of 8 notes here and a group of 8 notes here, and they're moving sequentially across strings like this, right? So if we understand this to be in 4/4 time, then that means that we could count this potentially like 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. This can be another spot that trips people up because some tabs don't have any rhythmic information whatsoever. So we also have the option of deciding the stroke that we use. So sometimes you'll see above, people will mark like this. So it looks kind of like a downward, and then like a little V, a downward U, and a V. So here what I'm expressing is alternate picking. Down, up, right? I'm just going to do that all the way across. So you might see this and wonder what that means. Now you know that this is indicating what kind of strumming pattern you might want to use. Some people also just write like D, U. So you might run into that also. These are just, variations to kind of help you understand how to read the tab and how to add more rhythm into it. Sometimes the shorthand doesn't exactly tell us what we need. So that's like down, up, down, up. So you'd be playing the 7 here, and you would play it twice. The first time you would play down, and then the second time you would play up. One thing that might be confusing if you're looking at the symbols is that this arrow is actually pointing downward, right? And this thing is pointing upward, but we have them labeled down and up. So don't get confused by that, because remember that the tab is actually upside down. So technically this is down and this is up, right? This is down and this is up. Anyway, once you get over that and you just kind of memorize it, then it doesn't get so confusing after the fact. Here's another example of something you might see. I'm going to count this in 3/4 here. So across the bars, we've got 1, 2, 3, like that. And here we've got indicated our down, down, down strokes, right? So that's down, down, down. This is an E5 power chord, by the way, these two. And so you're going to be playing that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, simple. Now up here we've got indicated PM, which stands for palm muting. And then sometimes there's a little marker that comes after that that tells you how long to palm mute for. Usually this vertical line indicates when you stop. So I tried to put it right before the final stroke here so that we could get like mute, mute, open, right? So that would go mute, mute, and then open, right? Mute, mute, open, something like that. So we would get 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Mute, mute, open, mute, mute, open, mute, mute, open. Another thing that you're going to see are slide markers. So slide marker basically looks like a little slash like that going upward. So here I've got 6, 10 right now, and then there's this line in between. So because the line here is going upward, that means that our slide is going upward. And then here we've got a slide that's going downward. The line is going downward, so that means that our slide is going to go downward. So that means that we're sliding on the fret from 6 to 10. Here we're sliding from 4 to 2. Okay, next let's spend a little time talking about hammer-ons and pull-offs. So usually these are going to be marked or denoted by some kind of line. Most of the time it's up here. Every once in a while you see it like downward like this too, but that can be confusing because in sheet music that also looks like a tie. So we're not going to do it that way, just to try to be clear. So this line that's above is going hammer on. Sometimes in older tabs you would see like an actual indicator H like that. And then so here is another example of a hammer on like this, right? And then let's just go ahead and be consistent, put an H there. That's going to sound like that. And then here we're going to do a pull off. So when we're going in the opposite direction, you see the numbers are going down, where that's going to be a pull off. So this is like a hammer on, and a pull off. You can play them all together or one at a time. We could also, for example, have a combination of a hammer on and pull off in one lick. If it was like that, and the line was going over it. You may also run into the vibrato symbol. So here we've got 5, 7, 5, and then above the 5 here is like a squiggle. And that squiggle, because it's right above the 5, indicates to us that this note should be given a vibrato, which is going to sound like this. Okay, next I want to take a look at bends. So here on the B string, I've got 5th fret marked. So that would mean you're playing the 5th fret. Sometimes you see on the internet, people write like this, 5B7. And this is a way of indicating that like you're supposed to bend from the 5th to the tone that exists at the 7th fret. This isn't the easiest or cleanest way to do it because this B sometimes also gets confused with the flat symbol, right? Like this. So, seeing that 5 flat or might look like flat 7. I just want you to be aware of that technique, but instead I'm going to show you a different way. So here we're looking at 5, right? So we're going to take that marker 5 and we're going to see on our tab something that looks like that, like an arrow pointing upward. This is an indication with the bend, by the way, an indication that you're bending that note. And then sometimes on top of it, you'll see like half. So this indicates a half step, meaning moving to the next fret over. Basically, this would be the equivalent of bending from the 5th fret tone to the 6th fret tone, right? Okay, so then if we might see something different that looks like, sometimes it's written full, like this, meaning a full step. Or sometimes you see it written like 1, meaning one whole step. So these shorthands are going to be a little tricky to navigate, but once you kind of figure out what they're trying to tell you, it's not too hard to understand it. First, let's do 5 to half. Now let's do 5 to 1, or 5 to whole step, or you might see that written full. And then we also might see something that indicates an up and downward bend. So it might go up and then down, and that down that it lands on might be like written like that, 5. So that means that you're doing a bend and then also a release. Another quick thing to take note of is that if your arrow that you see on your tab is going straight up like this, that usually indicates pre-bending, right? And then if your arrow is kind of curving and going up like that, then that usually just means like straight bending. So those can be a little confusing if you don't know what that means. But a pre-bend is where you bend the string first and then you play it. And sometimes you pull out of that bend or you slide into the note. This is stuff that'll come up in soloing, but here are some quick breakdowns to kind of help you understand that tablature. Well, I hope this has been helpful for you. And here I'm going to leave you with something to play around with on your own. Make sure to keep practicing. See you next time.